In this quick tip video, I'm going to show you how to join new yarn. If you're working on a project where you're creating stripes and you need to change color going from one color to the next, as is the case here with this scarf or with this hat, or if you're just working on, or if you're doing a project with just one color and you run out of one skein and you need to join another skein. So I'll show you both instances. So first, let me show you how to change the color when you're working on a stripy type project. So here I have just a small little sample of garter stitch that I've knit up over 12 stitches. And let's say I'm making a tiny little scarf, maybe for one of my cats, and I want to change the color now and go from a light green to a dark green. So I have my dark green yarn sample here just for this demonstration. And so what you want to do is, typically when you're changing colors to make a stripe pattern, you're going to change the color at the end of a row. And so when you get to the end, here's the working yarn of the main color, or the first color that you're working with. You take your second color, leave about 4 to 6 inches of a tail, maybe not quite that much, but enough to be able to weave this end into a tapestry needle so that towards the end, when you need to weave ends in, you'll have enough left. So about 4 inches should be enough. And then what you want to do is just make a loop like that. You're not making a knot or anything. It's just a loop, not even a slip knot, just a loop. And you're going to go ahead and start knitting at that point. So insert just regularly as if you were to knit, and you take your yarn, put it through and knit, and your yarn is essentially joined. Now you'll see that it looks kind of wonky here and looks a little bit loose, and I'll show you what to do. What you want to do is just keep going for a few more stitches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and knit about 3 or 4 more stitches. And at this point, your new yarn is joined. Then what I'm going to come back and do is I'm going to come back to this end. I'm going to pull on that green yarn just a little bit, okay, the light green yarn. And then I'm going to take my dark green yarn, and just for temporary purposes, I'm going to go ahead and just gently knot these. Now I just put a single knot just to kind of keep it in place. You can do sort of a bow knot or a knot such that it'll pull through. I don't quite know all the names of the knots, but you could, for instance, do this and just make a little bow knot here. Okay, just to keep it in place. That's all we want to do at this point. We really don't want to tie a double knot there because you don't want your work to have all kinds of knots all over the place. And that's it. You're going to keep working with this new yarn, and you've just joined a new yarn right there. Now at the end, when you're done with the knitting, when you're done with the whole thing, you're going to come back, undo this knot, and at that point you're going to weave these ends in. So when you work on a project, for instance, like this, where I've changed color every about 3-inch square, I do have to weave in both ends at each time, because it wouldn't do for me to keep carrying the color over. And let me show you what I mean by that. Now, if you just had a couple rows in this next color, this dark green color, for instance, and then you wanted to go back to your light green color, then you need not slip or snip this existing working tail. You can just let it hang there. Go ahead and finish both your rows with the next color. So let me just go ahead and knit through this row here so that I can get back to that same end. And this again works if you're working off, or your pattern is such that your row ends up coming back to that same end. Okay, actually that's not quite true. I guess it could work on either end, it doesn't matter. But bottom line is, when you get to this point and now you want to go back to your previous yarn, your green yarn, which is still here, you haven't cut it, the light green yarn, then just hold this dark green yarn or the previous color to the back, bring the color that you want to use to the front, and pick it up, and then just start knitting with it. And this really only works if, and this, what I call is carrying the color over. This really only works, I think, in my experience, when you're dealing with color changes every couple rows or so. If you're dealing with color changes more than 2 rows, then carrying this color will create a big sort of line of contrasting color on the side, and it may not look as good. And also this might work well for patterns where, let me show you here, I have an example of a bag that I'd made, just a stockinette stitch bag with a handle, and you'll notice how I've kind of done sort of a Doppler effect with these stripes here, and you'll notice how the stripes are very, very close over here. So for those ones, I didn't keep changing or cutting the color, but I just kept carrying them over. But in this case, I wasn't so worried because I did seam that end in, and so by seaming the end in, you kind of hide that color carry through. So if you're making a scarf, it might be okay if it's just 1 or 2 rows where you're carrying over the color, but if it's more than a couple rows, then you do want to snip off the previous color work. So for instance here, you would work in the light cream, you would join the red yarn, so you'd snip off the white cream yarn, get here, rejoin the white cream yarn. At this point you'd snip off the red yarn. So yes, you do have a lot of ends at the end that you'll have to weave in. I've provided a link to my video which shows you how to weave ends in. And so this is how you would join yarn to make a stripy pattern. Now let's say I'm working on this green yarn and all of a sudden I'm down to my last little piece. I'm just gonna snip this here. Let's say I've run out of yarn and I need to join yarn. Now I prefer to join yarn at the edges typically. So if I know ahead of time that I'm going to be running out of yarn soon, then I'll wait till I get to whichever is the closest edge, leaving me still about 4 inches of the yarn, and I'll try to join my yarn at the edge. But you don't have to. You can certainly join your yarn in the middle. So let's say you've knit and all of a sudden you get to this point and you realize, oh, I only have this much yarn. What do? Well, you go and get yourself another skein. And in this case, I don't have another light green skein, so let's just assume our dark green skein is our light green skein at this point. And so I'm gonna take my new skein and I'm gonna join it here. So it's pretty much the same process. You have your existing yarn that's getting over or almost over. You take your new piece of yarn, again, leave about 4 to 6 inches, just make a loop, and you would go ahead and just knit with that. Okay, just like that. And again, knit maybe about 3 or 4 stitches. Actually, I'll just get to the end since there's only 1 more stitch left. And now you could do the same thing here. Here you have your previous yarn. Here you have the new skein that you joined. You can go ahead and just do a simple single knot, which later you can remove just to keep it in place, or as I showed before, you could do a little bow knot. Just make 2 little bows and just join them like that. And just leave it like that in place. When you're done, eventually, and you'll be ready to weave the ends in, you just come here, take it off, and weave the ends in. So this is how you would join yarn. Now, of course, this is just one of the ways you join yarn. There are a few other ways that you can do that, but this I find is the simplest way, and it works with pretty much any type of yarn. This example I'm showing you here is just acrylic yarn, so it'll really work with any type of yarn: cotton, acrylic, wool. If you have wool, there is another technique called spit splicing, and I will cover that in a separate video perhaps down the line, but for now this would be a simple way to join the yarn. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please click the like button, and if you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe to my channel, Knittycat Knits. Thanks as always for watching, and happy knitting!